Today, I'm joined by a special guest to talk about the Make America Healthy Again movement, about the Dr. Fauci situation, and much, much more. Dr. Simone Gold, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here, Stephen.
So you are someone that I followed through the scamdemic and enjoyed the information that you were putting out on medical freedom and trying to make America healthy again before that was even a catchphrase. So I want to definitely go through that. Just some background for my audience. Dr. Gold is a brilliant physician. She is an author. She also started a healthcare network, Gold Care, where people can get access to really great medical care. The first thing I wanted to jump in with you on is RFK Jr. This guy, I believe, is going to get a lot done. There's people on one side saying he's a crazy anti-vaxxer nut job. Others are saying, well, he wanted to make America healthy again, but he's already been captured. And others are saying, just give this guy time. He's already got some things in motion. We'll talk a little bit about that. What are your thoughts on the Make America Healthy Again movement and RFK Jr. being confirmed as the new Secretary of Health?
Yes, I just want to add for the audience that in addition to being an attorney, in addition to being an emergency physician, I'm also an attorney, which did inform and does inform how I think through these matters. I am a huge fan actually, of Bobby Kennedy Jr. I've known him for probably 5 years now. We met during all the COVID lies. He is a thoughtful, intelligent, very kind, highly intelligent person. I do wish people who had originally supported him but are getting nervous would just kind of calm down. It's very difficult to get anything done in Washington. You have to do it carefully. It's threading a needle for sure. Big Pharma runs the government, not the other way around. He has his hands full. This is not a man who is confused on the issues. This is not a man who can be dissuaded or captured. You know, he's not there for power. He's not there for fame. He's a Kennedy after all. For example, a lot of people criticize his op-ed on measles, and they said that he was retreating because he spoke about the MMR vaccine. But if you read the body of the editorial he wrote, he actually advocated for vitamin A, which is very important if you get measles. And I can't think of any other instance in which our federal government has actually recommended something that was not financially beneficial to the pharmaceutical industry. So I have a lot of faith, and I think it's going to be good times ahead.
Okay, great. I wanted to just go through a few things. So right out of the gate, he cancels this huge push for the flu shot. He's setting up a commission to study vaccine safety and efficacy. He's changed the rules around food companies being able to hide additives in their food, whether they're safe or not. Many of them are completely banned over in Europe. He's called for an in-depth study of the cause of autism. He paused a $460 million COVID vaccine pill study, and he wants to get ultra-processed food out of school lunches and much, much more. Your thoughts on these first big changes that he's making?
I can't believe I'm living in a time when the presidential administration actually is paying attention to the health of Americans. This has never happened before. Let's not lose sight of that. This is very, very encouraging. I was not a person who paid attention to big ag. I barely paid attention to big pharma before the last 5 years. So the fact that he's tackling both is really very exciting. I was over in Japan and Europe last year, and I did a little taste test of a couple of fast food places, McDonald's, and the food really tasted the same, but they had many, many, many less ingredients. It's actually completely solvable in our country. You can force the private companies to do the same thing for us that they're doing over in other nations. It's a scandal of high proportion that we put essentially poison in our food and poison in our water. So I'm excited at all these changes that he's starting.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's like you can't say, oh gosh, McDonald's is going to have to redo their entire menu. They're already in other countries with better menus, healthier menus.
The same. They have like French fries. They have French fries over there. So that was one of the things I did a taste test. And they have 3 ingredients it was in Tokyo. And they, in our nation, I don't know exactly. I think there's like 12, because there's a lot of preservatives. What is that? Oh my gosh.
And Europe won't take our food, so we don't get to export our food, American food, farmers, because they believe that the food in America is poisonous. And based on our bodies, chronic health, inflammation, I would agree with them that it does feel like we're being poisoned compared to a couple of decades ago.
Yes, we have a lot of reasons for obesity and diabetes and pre-diabetic conditions in our nation. This is only one of them. But the poisonous and addictive qualities of our foods is a piece of it. There are other problems, like we're more sedentary than we should be, right? We're very car culture. But the government's role is not to make things worse for its citizens, not to allow corporations to profit by putting in highly addictive and highly processed ingredients that are not necessary for the food. Just make the companies do it better. They do it in other nations.
Yeah. So in the last 24 hours, I saw a big story that came out. The New York Times is now saying, wait a minute, we were misled by science and we're putting out lots of lies for the last couple of years about COVID, the origins, how to handle that. Do you believe that they're being honest, or do you think that this is a scapegoat to try to redeem their reputation?
The scandal is that nobody is investigating why journalists are no longer having journalistic curiosity. This was known, I think the first senator who said it, I think was Josh Hawley. He said it in February of 2020. I said it by March or April 2020, and I'm just a bedside clinician. It was very, very easy to know that it came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, because that was only about 4 or 5 miles away from the bat market where it supposedly came from. And China had a history of having safety breaches at lower level labs. The Wuhan Institute of Virology is the only level 4 biosafety lab in China. And China already had breaches at their level 3 labs. It was clear that it was, from there. They aggressively hid it. The government did that because they were profiting as well. But how come journalists were not investigating this? There were a lot of independent doctors saying it, and there were independent people on social media saying it. So the scandal here is that the New York Times is reporting this. What is this? 5 years too late. We're at 5 years.
Five years behind the Times.
Literally 5 years behind me, and I'm a bedside clinician, private citizen.
I'm a journalist in my basement, and I knew most of this stuff. How did the New York Times not? To me, it's like, if you didn't know this, it's because you didn't want to know this.
Correct.
That's how I feel. But let me go a little bit deeper on this article. So basically, it says, they're now saying it's confirmed that this was a lab leak. Hello, we already knew that, right? But I thought this was an interesting paragraph from the New York Times. We have since learned that to promote the appearance of consensus, some officials and scientists hid or understated crucial facts, misled at least one reporter, orchestrated campaigns of supposedly independent voices, and even compared notes about how to hide their communication in order to keep the public from hearing the whole story. Really? They only misled one reporter? This whole thing is like they're just completely, they're the monkey covering their eyes, in my opinion.
It is to the extent that any of these journalist legacy media organizations receive any federal funds, they need to be yanked. I don't know if they do or if they don't, but it's so shameful. We do not have a free citizenry if you don't have a free press. That's fundamentally what went wrong. It's not new that people will chase their own financial interests. It's not really new that Pfizer, Moderna did this. What is disgusting, reprehensible, is the regulatory capture of government workers who are supposed to be working for the taxpayer, and that journalists who are supposed to be independent were also working for the Democrat Party. I don't know what to say. I mean, the journalists have a real role to play in keeping the citizens of a nation free.
Yeah, they are nobody holds the government accountable except for the press, right? When things come out, people go, "Oh shoot, I'm either going to lose my seat or I'm going to behave better." And this needed to happen. Okay, just a little bit deeper on this, and then I want to talk to you about Dr. Fauci. But The New York Times has concluded natural immunity is better than the vaccine. They've also confirmed, wait a minute, the vaccine actually does injure people. They also talk about the fact that medications that would have saved millions of lives were covered up, buried, or lied about by Fauci and others. This is just crazy to me that the New York Times, all these years later, has just finally decided to poke their head up out of the ground and say, we messed up, but we're far enough away from it now that we should all just move on.
Let me speak to the truth on the ground for your viewers and listeners. This was not a difficult conceptual problem that was so difficult to sort out. This was not the CIA and the Kennedy assassination. This was easy to discern if you could read. We knew that hydroxychloroquine worked on SARS-2 because they studied it because it worked well on SARS-1 from 15 years earlier. We knew that the shots were experimental and rushed. We knew that the shots didn't stop transmission. It was in the applications that Pfizer and Moderna submitted to the FDA. We knew that natural immunity is always the best, most robust, most long-lasting. America's frontline doctors brought lawsuits on behalf of COVID-recovered college students, COVID-recovered soldiers. This was a calculated, coordinated effort, and it's shameful that the New York Times isn't doing a deep analysis at their internal highest levels. Why they covered up the story. They didn't just discover it this week. They covered it up for years.
Okay. I literally don't know your opinion on this, but I'm excited to hear your opinion. Why do you think Dr. Anthony Fauci is free to walk around with so much information out there now about funding this, lying about this, covering this up, manipulating the government, manipulating big pharma, all of this to save his reputation, and then he gets a presidential pardon? Your thoughts on the whole Dr. Anthony Fauci thing?
Anthony Fauci, at the very least, he did much more than this. He I think, murdered people. However, at the very least, he lied repeatedly, including under oath when Senator Rand Paul was questioning him. One of the lies he told the American people and the world is that 6-foot social distancing was a useful maneuver. And in January 2024, under oath, he said that it was made up, it was fabricated. He also was caught on an audio recording saying that people who pushed back in favor of freedom, they would be squelched of their ideological bull crap. He's got that on audio. So this is a man who not only is guilty, he knew he was guilty, he knew what he was doing when he was doing it. He participated in gain-of-function research. NIH threw him and They made a lot of money off of this. And he had a similar scam, too much to go into, in the 80s and 90s with the AIDS situation, HIV situation. He's free at the moment because there's an auto pen that signed a pardon for him. However, I'm a lawyer. I don't see how an auto signature can possibly be valid legally for any of these maneuvers. The intent is not the signature. The intent is what the president meant when he did it, right? So if he didn't actually sign it and he can't say his intent, it didn't happen as far as I'm concerned. So I don't know what the future will hold. It seems to me that it may be that President Trump doesn't ever really want to go back and revisit this. It will be up to him to decide what he thinks is best for the nation. I would like our nation to go forward in truth. I think when you go forward on lies, it's very destabilizing. So I would like to see him prosecuted for that reason, not for revenge, but because it's destabilizing to proceed the rest of these years on a foundation of lies.
Yeah, I mean, you just a few minutes ago, you brought up the CIA and JFK's assassination. We've been living under lies for decades. It's been harmful. It's bred mistrust. It's made people, they look crazy if they have a theory that's conspiracy theory, and then those conspiracies end up being true. But then you're gaslit, you're called names, you're shamed and humiliated. I just think
exactly. That's why I reference it. That's what I want to avoid this episode becoming. Way more than half the nation knows. Probably 3/4 of the nation agrees with this. And I say that even if you're not political, most people who took the shots ended up getting COVID again or for the first time. So there's a whole huge swath of the American population that knows that the government lied to them when Biden and Walensky and I forgot the fellow's name, the CDC director, said that these shots stop transmission. So there's a whole enormous swath of the population that knows that they were lied to. And I think the only way to go forward and be a very stable, connected peoples is to examine the truth and then move forward.
I agree with that. Okay, that just brought up a question, Dr. Gold. I agree with you. Most of the people I interact with, even those that got vaccinated, they've had their eyes open. They go, wait a minute, I think this might have been dangerous. I think I might have actually gotten really sick from this. I keep getting sick over and over. I have a mother-in-law that's had COVID like 3 times, and she's been vaccinated and boosted like 3 or 4 times, right? So, but my question or an opinion from you is, do you believe members of Congress know this and they're purposely turning a blind eye to it? Or are they really that out of touch with the American people and the truth? I
would, just my honest opinion, I think 80 to 90% of congressmen know this, meaning all the Republicans know this and the vast majority of Democrats know this. And there's probably a sliver of very hardcore communist, leftist, not even liberals, who refuse to see it. But everyone in their life had situations like your mother-in-law. Everyone had them. I've really never met anyone in my daily life who didn't run into that situation. So, and then everybody heard Fauci say that 6-foot social distancing was like a made-up number, right? And everybody saw that the masks didn't do anything. They saw the kids were harmed. So I actually think the majority, I think it's a political calculation whether you want to revisit the past, which I think you should, because I don't think you can go forward safely as a nation. I don't want to live on conspiracies. Or if you think it's better just to go forward without examining it. And I think it will be President Trump's leadership in one way or the other that will determine which direction we go.
Okay. On January 6th, the day that the Capitol was breached, my wife and we were in Orlando, Florida, masked up, having a quick little vacation with the kids. And I said to my wife, hey, that Dr. Gold that you like is there at the Capitol talking about medical freedom. And then everything happened with the FBI and entering the Capitol. And the next thing I read, they were going after you. What happened? Help me understand your side of this story.
Yes. I don't know if your wife or you saw it ahead of time, but I had 4 speaking engagements that week, and I had one before J6. I had one on January 5th in Freedom Plaza, where I gave a medical freedom speech, and I was speaking all over the nation at that point. I actually had a government-issued permit to speak on the east side of the Capitol grounds. There were 20 scheduled speakers, myself and 3 congressmen and other kind of well-known public figures. But when we presented ourselves, they didn't let us speak. But I was on a mission to speak the truth on medical freedom. I was probably the only person there for a reason other than the fraud of the election. I was there really because there's a large audience that needed to hear the medical freedom message, and that was my lane. So I was actually standing on the Capitol steps giving my speech, and the police threw a flashbang, which made the crowd get agitated. And at the same time, the doors opened from the inside. There's videotape of all of this. Obviously, I'm a truthful person, but it happens. There's videotape of all of it. You can see that I tumbled into the building. I kind of fell into the threshold. I almost fell. And there was no going backwards because there's thousands of people really surging in behind me. And that's how I landed in the Capitol. Once inside, there was no easy way to exit. The only exit I knew was where I was just propelled inward. So I just started giving my medical freedom speech in the Capitol, and I did that twice. And again, there's video of me doing this. I mean, this is quite a cover, isn't it? I'm holding the speech in my hand. I'm giving the speech. You can see it on the government TV. And that was it. And at some point, there was an officer tapped me on my shoulder, asked me to leave. And then I attempted to leave. I waited in line, waited to get out. It was very hard to get out because people are pouring in. And it took about 25 minutes of me patiently waiting, all on video, to get out. And that was it. And we, of course, did not understand how this would be messaged to the world. I found out later that, and as you probably know, a lot of messages that people were sending each other, like, cell phone videos that they took themselves, the carriers didn't let those go through. So the only video that people were seeing were loops of the smallish areas where people had done wrong things, like they were climbing the scaffolding or doing little things that were incorrect. However, that had nothing to do with the vast majority of people who had J6. I mean, there was at least 1 million people in the city that day. I think it was 1.5 million. I've been in a lot of crowds. I'm telling you, this was over 1 million. And people in the media were saying it was 30,000, 40,000. That's propaganda. You can clearly not confuse 30 or 40,000 with over 1 million. That's not possible. And then 12 days later, while working in my apartment, I just endured the absolute most horrific FBI SWAT team raid on my apartment. They broke my door down with a battering ram. There were 20 armed officers in tactical gear with huge weapons pointed at my chest with laser sight beams. And I was handcuffed and shackled and perp walked in front of the neighbors. And the story is alarming that a public figure, a doctor, lawyer, no criminal history, no interaction ever in the past with the criminal justice system, would ever be arrested in such a manner. There are rules why and when you call a SWAT team, right? Prior criminal violence, gang affiliation. But when you call huge SWAT team force on someone like me, you're really trying to intimidate the citizenry. And frankly, I think you're trying to get the person killed, because you've got all these officers who have been told that they're about to arrest a highly dangerous person, and they're very rushed on adrenaline. And so I think they'd be very happy if they took out people like me. And so there's reasons for this, and this became the subject of my book, because I needed to show the American people that kind of this fascist infrastructure where people just follow orders, even when they make no sense, is already part of American culture. And I want people to see it and respond to it. And in their own life, when they encounter these moments, not to comply with things that they know are wrong. I plead with the officers. I hope they read the book. They knew they were doing the wrong thing. I could see it on a lot of their faces. So it was amazing what the government did to me.
Wow.
That's just a taste.
That's way worse than I expected. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that, on the one hand, you're like trying to point out to the American people, you're living in a narrative, you're being fed propaganda, they're hurting you. And then fast forward, you are now living in their narrative, their propaganda, they're trying to hurt you. Unbelievable. This is crazy. Is there a lawsuit against the government on your behalf?
So, Jace, we started a collective group called wearej6.com. We urge anyone who's interested in the subject to come listen. We live stream every Saturday, noon Eastern. And we are J6, and there needs to be restitution. I believe that this administration wants to make that restitution. This is analogous to what the federal government did to Japanese citizens in, I think it was 1943, 1944. I forget the years, I need to check. But we interned Japanese Americans because we were afraid as a nation because of Pearl Harbor and all of that, right? I understand the fear, but that doesn't mean you can pick up peaceful non-criminals who are citizens and just throw them away. The same we did it to Japanese Americans, we did it this time to conservative Americans, politically conservative Americans. This should highly alarm people. There's so many aspects to the story that you just have to read, Stephen, and I urge everyone, please consider pre-ordering it on Amazon, Selective Persecution, because you need to be aware of this. Let's say you're listening to my story and you say, you know what, she's guilty of sin, she was there at J6. Let's say you believe that, no problem. Does that mean you also punish everyone who knows me? People who worked with me were punished. My minor son was punished. What do I mean? These people were put on no-fly list by our federal government. My minor son was followed around in the airport for 4 to 5 hours every single time he flew for almost 2 years. The TSA would descend upon him, 4 to 6 agents, and be with him the whole time. Is that the America that you really want to live in? I ask, these are serious questions, the kind of country you want to live in. So I put all the receipts. It took about 2 years to write this book because I wanted to have all the documentation. So it's quite a story. It's honestly, it's like a John Grisham novel.
Yeah. Like if you hadn't lived through it,
Yeah.
you would go, oh my gosh, I can't believe this person survived this crazy experience. Did you ever feel like you were out of your own, like you were observing your own life and feeling like you were in like the Twilight Zone or something?
Very much. I would say the time I felt most like that was, I'm not sure if you knew, but I was not, after being arrested and taking a misdemeanor trespass plea, I was actually thrown in prison. And I was put in a maximum security. Again, this is one of the things that I'm demonstrating to everyone who's listening. There's something wrong with the system if you put someone like me in maximum security prison. Nonetheless, there I was, and I was in isolation for 9 days, and nobody would say anything. And I thought I'd be there the whole 60 days. But just finding myself in an isolation 6x10 cell, which is an overwhelmingly mentally torturous experience. And then when I was moved to general population in a maximum, it's completely surreal. There's no way to describe it. But you know what I did? You have to be optimistic. And you have to also be a realist. So there I was in this crazy situation, and I went in with the intent to do something positive, and I had very limited options. So I interviewed all the women, and I intended to make that a book, didn't have the time, but it's a chapter in my book about why all these women are in prison, because the stories are not what you would think. Why are women in maximum security? Read the chapter. It's going to change your mind about what we think of as law and order and the judicial system and the Bureau of Prison. The Bureau of Prison is really like just another bureaucratic institution getting big in order to feed itself. It's disturbing.
Okay. One thing that I want to hear from a medical professional and a lawyer is, why on earth were previously known drugs not used to treat people, and when they were, they went after those doctors' licenses. They destroyed the reputation of Nobel Prize winning medication that is now being touted as like a miracle drug. Why was all of that in order to lead to a vaccine so big pharma could make billions and billions of dollars? Help me understand that, Dr. Gold.
Yes, it's a very interesting backstory, because the hatred that was poured on these cheap, safe, generic drugs that had been around for decades was bizarre, to say the least. Hydroxychloroquine, we all used it as doctors. Ivermectin, we all used it as doctors. Completely safe medicines. Hydroxychloroquine safer than Tylenol. And all of a sudden, our government and our media just were pouring tremendous hate on it. And it was pretty specific in America, some Western nations too, but it was really America. It took me a long time to understand, and the lawyer part of me finally put it together. To roll out the shots quickly on an EUA, which is an emergency use authorization, needed you had to pass a couple of legal hurdles. In other words, Pfizer and Moderna make these shots. They want to roll it out because they're going to make a lot of money. What are the rules to rolling out something fast? There has to be no other treatment available. It is an absolute mandatory requirement of getting an EUA. You cannot get an EUA for this new shot if there's something else that you can use that's been tested and tried and been around for a lot of years. That makes sense. So they had to knock out the competition. They had to knock out hydroxychloroquine. They had to say it didn't work. They had to say ivermectin didn't work, and then they rolled the shots out quickly. It was black letter law. It's disgraceful. It's disgraceful. And it makes you wonder what other medical lies are underlying in our whole healthcare system. It's why we went ahead and built Gold Care, because of these lies. I said, if they're willing to lie about this, what else are they lying about? Are there cancer treatments they're not telling us about? What are the causes of autism? What are they not telling us? Because they covered this up. I don't know how you manage to cover up a drug like hydroxychloroquine, which everybody uses all over the world, and we use in America for decades. Give it to it. The CDC website said you can give it infants, breastfeeding mothers, the elderly, and you can do it for years, right? In Europe, in Africa, people are using it all the time. Ivermectin, as you said, won the Nobel Prize in medicine. If you can smear those drugs, you can make people think anything.
Yeah. So strange to me how, you mentioned I think you said ivermectin is safer than Tylenol. And then now you read about how dangerous these mRNA shots are. compared to something safer than Tylenol. And yet that was the route that we went down, because a shot could put hundreds of dollars per person, where ivermectin might be pennies or dollars compared to hundreds of dollars. I think this whole thing was a giant lie. Dr. Fauci played a huge role in it, and Big Pharma came out ahead. And now, like, everyone's just like turned their head, like, well, we'll just let them continue to kill people.
That's why we have to get to the bottom of it, because there's so many reasons you have to get the truth out. Here's just a small but serious example. Governor Cuomo of New York, when you look at his past, it's well documented in COVID, Are We the Prey, or something like that, a book by the Bregans. So he has a chapter on Cuomo. So I didn't write it because he did such a beautiful job. Well, but I lived it. I remember Cuomo absolutely made policies that killed tens or perhaps hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers with his nursing home policies and many other policies. Now the man is trying to become the mayor of New York. That wouldn't happen if we have a reckoning about the truth. But people are not talking about it. So this is why you have to talk about the truth. You cannot have a person like that in any kind of policy leadership position. He should be in prison for his policies. And I don't say that lightly, because I don't think you should put politicians in prison most of the time. But I was living it in real time. And it was very clear that he was putting in policies that were killing old, frail people. And I think he was doing it to get a political advantage over Trump and some other reasons. But you cannot have people like that in public office, and he's literally running for mayor of New York.
Yeah, I can't prove it, but I swear they were trying to pump up the numbers to get more money out of the government, and the hysteria that CNN and others needed every night. You know, they had the death count. Trump's killed this many people every day. It would tick up. He was blamed for everything. Meanwhile, it was, Governor Cuomo and Fauci and others, lying to the American public. I just think it's such a disgrace. It's such a stain. And yet most people just seem to have moved on from it.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons I persevered on this book is also to have a historical record. There's obviously 2 or 3 chapters on the COVID lies and on Fauci's lies and the public health community's lies. And we need a public record. So there's actually many hundreds of references in the book, because it should serve as a historical reference.
Oh, well, I appreciate you taking time to write it. Okay, final question. Is it odd or poetic justice that Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who wrote the Great Barrington Declaration, that COVID was being handled completely wrong and his reputation was damaged, is now in top leadership in the Trump administration to try to correct some of the health problems that we're having?
Dr. Jay Bhattacharya is somebody I also know very well. He's a very honorable, ethical, high-quality human being. I always like to start with that, because I do think the quality of the human being is a very relevant factor, at least as important as their actual beliefs. So this is a thoughtful person who thinks through dilemmas and problems and questions. He and I were actually not lockstep on issues. He was very focused on the lockdowns, which of course I was too. We were lockstep on that, but there was more, we disagreed on things over the shots, and he wouldn't really speak out as much on early treatment, for example, but he's always been against mandates. He just thought that was very illegal, unconstitutional. And I'm delighted. And it's funny, right? Isn't it funny? That he's in charge now. I mean, yeah. I think it's great. But
it would be like them making you the Capitol Police.
Exactly.
After what happened to you at the Capitol Police, I agree with your assessment. When I interviewed him, I was like, okay, we're lockstep on a lot of stuff, but he just was like hesitant, I think, to come out too strong against big pharma and the vaccines. Now, I think with a little bit more experience and good people around him, maybe that will change. But I found him to be an incredibly good human being when I interviewed him.
You are correct. And there's also different roles for people to play. I know that he heard me, and I know that his thought process was influenced not only by my stance on early treatment and the vaccines, but also what I endured from J6. He was one of not so many people who called to tell me how sorry and sad he was about the whole thing. So this is a fine human being, and he will navigate it thoughtfully and intelligently. And honestly, the NIH is a behemoth organization. It's not as though it can move, so rapidly. So, it's a tough job, but he's also quite bright, and I'm looking forward. I would like the NIH to stop funding partisan journals, for example, medical journals that are completely partisan. If there's any funding from the NIH to them, there's a lot to do. I hope he gets it done.
I know. Yeah. Godspeed to him and RFK Jr., because I know they would probably do it differently if they could, but there is a lot of bureaucracy, and I think they're trying to build an airtight case against certain things if they're going to make a big public shift. But right now, cleaning up the food, cleaning up the baby food, I feel like they're taking steps in the right direction, but it's going to possibly take the full 4 years, maybe longer. But Godspeed to them. Dr. Gold, I know your time is valuable. Thank you for sharing it with us. I'm going to put some direct links down below. People can go check out the new book on pre-order that's coming out. If people want to learn about Gold Care for their health, where do I point them towards?
I welcome everybody to come join us. It's very simple, goldcare.com, goldcare.com. This is where you can find accurate medical information and independent physicians who are not bought and paid for by Big Pharma, goldcare.com.
Okay, I'll put that direct link down below. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Stephen.